Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Facebook Live, a do or die situation. I have with me today several of the members of the film that is about to be released, the documentary film called YAPs, which is a product of Victory Hall Opera, which I directed. We have with us some people that I'm going to introduce to you soon. But first of all, the premise of the film. So YAPs is a film about 5 young opera singers. They're all here tonight in various times. As they try to enter the opera industry and try to find their place in a classical world, which is full, as we know, most of us are in the classical industry, and we know that it's full of a lot of traditions and a very sort of set in stone way of doing things. So our young artists spent the year as their gorgeous selves with all their different stories and all their different experiences, sort of trying to test the boundaries of that classical system, see where they could maintain their whole identities whilst sort of finding their place in the midst of this crazy opera world. We sort of sensed when we started making this film that there was a bit of an impending cultural collision that may be happening soon, or maybe already is, between the sensibilities of Gen Z singers and other musicians as well, and the traditional classical industry. We imagine that this probably will has already found its way into audience behaviors as well. There's a cultural clash between modern, contemporary young audiences and the way that the opera industry has been doing things. So it just seemed like a really good opportunity to explore all of that material through the eyes of singers, which is what Victory Hall Opera, the company that I'm artistic director of, and that many of you have worked with, many of you are friends of, that's our mission, is to sort of upend the way that opera companies have been doing things and to place singers at the center of the creative process, to kind of put the creative reins in the hands of singers and to see what happens. So this is one of the things that happens is a documentary gets created about young opera singers and their experiences. Also joining us today is Kathy Kelly, who many of you are familiar with, but let me let them all into the room so that you can experience their beautiful faces while I introduce them. Boink, there they are. Hello, everybody. So let's start with Amandalynne Perzyk, seeing as she was the first to arrive. Originally from Detroit, Michigan, Amandalynne is a graduate of CCM and was a YAP at Opera Sarasota. When I first called her to tell her that she had made it into this documentary film, she was in South Korea on an army base with her husband, Luke, who is also in the film, who was stationed there at that time. But in true opera singer fashion, she made it work. Her vocal journey, which is from, let's say, full lyric into tiptoeing into the dramatic, is a story that will resonate with a lot of young singers, as it did with me. So joining us now from Germany, this girl gets around from the early hours of the morning in Schönbuch, Germany, Amandalynne Perzyk. Hello, wave,
Hi,
tell them who you are. Okay. I'm going to race through these because we've got a lot to get through. Kathleen Kelly, Miss Kathy Kelly, joining us from the future, from Tokyo today, tomorrow. This pianist, writer, pedagogue, librettist, and personal mentor of mine has had one of the most wide-ranging, high-level careers in classical music today. But even as I say that description, I can feel her cringing just a little bit because of reasons that we will discuss. If you don't already subscribe, you now must subscribe to her blog, which is called Music Minus None. Welcome, Miss Kathy Kelly from the future in Tokyo. Chuanyuan is familiar to many of you as a rising countertenor, but I think he is very soon poised to shift from the rising to the leading. You heard it first here. His YAPs have included Song Studio, Chautauqua Opera Neo. He is currently at Opera Saratoga. He's a multiple offender in terms of young artist programs. He is the youngest member also of the Victory Hall Opera Permanent Troupe. Many of you will also be familiar with his supreme image on Instagram. Chuanyuan, welcome to the group. Matteo Adams is our next guest. He is from Beaumont, Texas. Matteo has also become something of a YAP expert, having been a two-time participant at Sarasota Opera. He's done programs at St. Pete Opera, Queen's Summer Vocal Institute, Morelia Summer Opera Festival. He heads soon to Opera Neo. He had to choose originally between a career as a professional tennis player and a life as a professional tenor. We are so glad that he chose the hard path. Matteo Adams, we're glad you could get out of rehearsal and join us tonight. Welcome from Florida. And joining us later, we'll have Marissa Howard, and I'm going to introduce her when she gets here. But for now, Ria Eper, I forgot, sorry. She's on the next page, that's why. From Manhattan School of Music to a surprising encounter with overnight TikTok fame via the Catholic Church music scene of Stamford, Connecticut, I have come to know Ria Eper as part mezzo, part bowerbird. Her eclectic and amazing bedroom design is reason enough to watch the YAP film, currently starring very appropriately as Alice in Alice the Trail to Wonderland at, I'm going to say La Chat Farm. They probably say Latchet or something. Welcome, Ria Eper. All right, good. So, very open-ended general question to get us started. In a few words, how would you describe the atmosphere on the ground as an admin or as a singer in opera right now? I'm going to let the wisdom of experience begin with Kathy Kelly.
Oh dear. What's the proverb? May you live in interesting times. We definitely are living through times of extreme turbulence and extreme precarity, right? And I think classical music in all of its spaces, the performing spaces and the academic spaces, is coming up against what has long been a disconnect between sort of this old narrative of apprenticeship slowly leading to mastery, which kind of has an implied, you spend your years of service and then you end up at a point, and there's an implied path that's there to follow with an implied result at the end. But that's long been butting up against the sort of disappearance of that actual employment narrative, particularly in North America, right? As a lot of employment in the gig economy has become more and more precarious. I think classical music has been in denial of that disconnect in the way that it talks about how it educates and how it prepares people. And now our backs are really up against the wall with it. So I think we find ourselves full of energy, trying to figure out how to support each other and go forward, but we also are late in coming to language about all of that.
Great answer. Yeah, let's move on to one of the other guests tonight. Who else has something to say about, perhaps maybe Chuan? You are in a program right now. Can you tell us what it feels like to be in a YAP right now?
In the YAP itself is actually okay. But outside of it, there's a lot of fear, I'd say, because at this climate, and you see opera companies kind of cutting down shows because of funding issues. And as Kathy was saying, this disconnection between repertoire versus audience and what we think people want, there is a huge disconnection. But within the opera field, as a young artist, you see, even if it's 2025, we're 4 4 or 5 years since the pandemic, a lot of the contracts for individual artists are still going out to people who got canceled from the COVID years. And so for people who graduated during that time and are kind of swimming through things, it's rather difficult because this whole hierarchy is still kind of backed up. But in the meantime, companies would always want to hear younger singers. And so people who are in this 25 to 30 range is just a little bit in the air with what they can do and also what they want to do.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that we are still dealing with the effects of, with the aftermath of all of that rescheduling from the pandemic. I think that those of us who sort of work show at a time, one show at a time, don't think a lot about that. But this is definitely very real for bigger companies. Ria, what's going on in your sort of mind right now in terms of, you're the youngest of our group, and you're certainly one of the best hustlers I know in terms of creating opportunities for yourself. But what are the feelings you're experiencing as you sort of face this behemoth that is the opera industry, and trying to sort of find a place in it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like I'm the least qualified to answer this because I haven't even really, like, in my opinion, breached the surface of even opportunities within the operatic world. I've been trying nonstop, not going to stop trying, but it's interesting. I was actually having a conversation with Amandalynne earlier about this. I have kind of made peace with the idea of never being included in a production or a prestigious program or opera company, because I've been like nonstop auditioning and nothing. So I've been creating other opportunities outside of that, and it's been really lucrative. It's been wonderful. I'm experiencing things that I didn't even know I was capable or would even be interested as an artist. So really right now, I just feel kind of honestly hopeless when it comes to the opera world. But that doesn't mean that I won't stop pursuing a career in entertainment and singing and the arts.
Yeah, that's sort of one of the great travesties. Anytime you are working, and I'm sure Kathy will agree with this, but anytime you're working with young singers, meeting a lot of them, and sort of, there are definitely people that stand out as being like genuine artists, and Ria, all of you are those to me anyway. And it's like a personal insult when there's not opportunity being presented to people who I personally believe in, let me tell you. All right, so Matteo, do you think about the sort of the competition element of what you're going up against? Do you think about like, oh man, there are like 50 graduate tenors coming out of whatever prestigious programs this year? Or do you just kind of like keep your head to the grindstone? What's it like for you?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, in the sense that you have to keep your head to the grindstone in order to keep breaking in and singing for companies, and to Ria's point, it comes with a lot of rejection, and it's just getting that one break that hopefully leads to other things. And to both Chuanyuan and Ria's points, there's something to be said about the arts in the 21st century and just evolving, because even in school we heard all these stories about opera singers who they sang for one person and they had this sort of ladder that led them to the Metropolitan Opera. And I've actually been talking about this recently. That's not the same anymore. We have to evolve as the world evolves with us as artists. And it's just something to be said about, taking the art form to TikTok, or making memes, or just getting our faces and voices out there to operatic companies, maybe outside of the audition circuit, in the hopes that, another project can come outside of the audition aspect. So I think it's really about, yes, thinking about working to the grindstone and all the competition, but really, I've been really thinking about innovation and how to innovate myself in order to succeed in, this classical music world that's ever changing, even as we speak on this call right now. So that's what I've been thinking about.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. We've had our final singer from the group join us now, Marissa Howard. I'm just going to give her a brief introduction. A native of Colorado, Marissa is one of the cast's most quotable members, and you'll see what I mean when you all get a ticket to see YAPs when it finally comes online sometime later in June. More about that later. Marissa is a fierce advocate for accessibility, diversity, and innovation, which we were just talking about in opera. A coloratura soprano, Marissa fights daily against the stereotypes of her fach. And more than anything, if you don't know what a fach is, it's a voice type. Okay. Yeah. Her voice type. And more than anything, she wants opera to matter. A recent artist at Opera Saratoga and Chicago Opera Theater, Marissa Howard, joins us now from Chicago. Hi, Marissa.
Hi.
Hey. I'm going to go to you. I'm going to drop you in the water, and then I'm going to go to Amandalynne. How's it feeling to you, just being a young singer at the moment? Today, what's going on in your mind concerning this art form that we love?
I think a lot has changed, especially since I started doing the documentary. I think in a lot of ways, this art form can be so frustrating. When I first started this documentary, it felt like Sisyphus, I'm pushing the stone up the mountain over and over again. And, starting each audition season thinking that it's going to be different. As a soprano, things are a little bit different in the sense that the competition is so fierce. But since the time that the opera, Victory Hall Opera documentary started, I got my first AGMA contract. I'm now AGMA. I'm joining the Chicago Symphony in September. I just got back from a competition that I placed in and, won money for. I have an audition tonight. And I just got a contract that is pending for August. So it feels like in a lot of ways that it has come to me, and I'm so thankful. And I recognize that this is like a position of power, but I think that I recognize the frustration that comes with this career. And while I'm really thankful, the thing that I always want to advocate for other young artists is accessibility, and making sure that we don't make opera so difficult to perform and be in that artists don't have a fighting chance to participate in artistically.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. So, Amandalynne, I know that you've just started to get settled now, that Luke has been stationed. Amandalynne's husband has been now stationed in Germany. So that's a really great way, I think, for her to get sort of settled there in that German scene. Certainly for bigger voice types, the German market is much bigger. They do bigger operas more often, and there are more of them. How are you feeling about all of that, Amandalynne, and looking and having a little bit of distance now, I guess, on your just recent audition, last hopefully audition season in America?
So, listening to the original question and everyone's answers, it kind of made me think of this entire journey for all of us, not just us in this live space, but just all young singers right now. Really feels like a split timeline kind of moment. Because when you're in school, you study and you hear, oh, composers had these singers and it was great. And we perform all these shows. And then in the landscape today, it feels like the older generation, no, this is how it is supposed to be. Everything has to be perfect. And then we have the older generation above me where, no, this is how we're doing things. Oh, I know someone and that's how I got the job, like Matteo was saying. And then there's the pandemic group that finished school like me, and then you were really hopeful to get moving forward in your career, and then everything stopped, and you're trying to do as much as you can on the resume, but everything stopped, and then they're backlogged, and then you have to cater to the older people on these other timelines in the music field. So it honestly feels really overwhelming, because in the United States, I felt like I just didn't have a chance. In my bachelor's degree, I just could not afford to do a YAP. I couldn't afford to audition. I couldn't afford to fly anywhere. Just my home situation was not something that would permit me to do that. So I started really late in the game applying to things. And now leaving the United States, especially receiving the last couple of rejections, I just felt like, well, that chapter feels closed right now in terms of the YAP portion, because it feels inaccessible. It feels like no matter what I do or what I put into it, I'm just not getting what I want out of it. And it's made me extremely unhappy. So now moving to Germany, I'm in a different situation where I understand a lot of the language, but I can't speak enough to ask the questions that I need to. And the people that I know here, who are either singers or singers who are already auditioning here, or people who know people, are gatekeeping information. I've asked a couple of people multiple times, hi, I'd like to work with a coach or something while I'm sitting here and trying to get settled in this new environment. And they're not sharing that information. They say, oh yeah, I'll give you so-and-so's name and information. Yeah, it'll be great. Or yeah, I have so-and-so's information at the Stuttgart Staatsoper. It'll be wonderful. Weeks will go by and I'm still contacting and there's no information. So I can Google, I can use Opera Base, I can use some modern technology, but it's like Matteo said, we need to find a way to really use all of our resources if we're gonna bridge the gap between the old and the new. We also have to bridge the gap between those who have a network and those who don't have a network, and who are just as talented as the people who do have the network, so that we can continue making art and providing culture and history and something beautiful for this world, because this world is really dark. And without us, we're going to be replaced by robots and computers, and that's just so boring.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the gatekeeping of information, because I had this really interesting conversation with another one of our kind of admin guests in the film, Ariana Wehr. I always say her name with the German accent. And she is also a singer, and has now moved into doing a lot of consultancy work. And Ariana made the really good point of, having participated in very high level young artist programs in America, and having kind of done everything right and moved through the profession, she sort of was struck by how she only heard the information she needed to hear once she was selected for an elite opportunity. So there was this kind of like, oh, I need to know what I need to work on. I need to know how to get into the elite programs and how to get a career, but I can't get that information until I am in the program. I'm really interested to know what both Kathy and Chuan have to say about this, because I think that, both of you have been on that other side of that sort of elite opportunity curtain. And yeah, what do you think, Kathy?
Let me see where to start with that. Can I start in a slightly different place?
Sure.
One of the things that's really striking me as the old on this panel is really how, all of you are nailing it. Things have changed utterly since I was in my own high-level YAP in 1991 and 1992, when all of those programs were relatively new. And a lot of the ones that you're talking about having been in weren't around yet, or they were just starting to be around. And our programs are always a reflection of the economy at large. So back in the 90s, it was really like polish yourself to be the perfect little cog that can enter the opera machine and be available for what anybody wants you to be. And that worked for a lot of people at that time. And I'm really hearing from all of you the disconnect between, you know, now that my generation is the old generation, you know, there is a lot of conversation out there saying like, this is the way you do it because this is what worked for us, and it utterly doesn't work for you all anymore. But that's because everything in the economy has changed. You know, the way that work functions in the United States has changed utterly. So I know that's not the answer to your question, but that's what was in my mind before you asked it. In terms of the elitism, yeah, I mean, I battled against it, and then I kept that gate for a while, you know. And I remember, maybe it's just because it's morning in Tokyo. I'm not sure that I have like the wise mic drop moment to give you, but I remember so much that feeling that you're talking about, Amandalynne, of getting to San Francisco, and only when I was there beginning to receive the information that I needed. You know, you sort of needed to be chosen before people would start letting you in on the secrets, right? And then I don't know. I'm not sure where I'm going with this. I'm a little stuck. Somebody help me out.
Chuan, take over here.
Thank you.
I can go. Since we're living in a very capitalism world, let's talk about money. Because I've always wanted more transparency in the industry about pay. And as you said,
money.
being yeah,
Sorry.
and being in kind of both worlds a little bit. I guess as a countertenor, I got my perks because there's not many of us, and sometimes opportunity rises, and if they need a countertenor, they need a countertenor. And so some of my first professional gigs were some of my first gigs are professional gigs and not YAPs. And I've been in the past couple of years kind of stumbling in between, where I can do a concert and get $2,000-$3,000 versus I can do a whole program of 7 weeks also getting $2,000-$3,000. And sometimes it's I've done the work, I know what I'm doing is correct, and I have an artistic opinion, and I am worth that amount. But also some of the other time is like, oh, I'm not that good and I will never be good enough. I don't deserve that money. I'm only 27. Should I just be getting $500 a week pay for at least the next couple of years, right? But when you get to a certain point, you realize, oh, there's a lot more people getting almost 10 grand for a performance. And then your world just kind of opens up. And sometimes those are the people who don't come prepared. And then you have this whole kind of existential crisis of, if they can do that, what should I do? And all of that keeps happening. And because throughout the gigs that I have done and knowing other people's story, typically young artists are more prepared and female singers are more prepared. And so
Amen.
so we're in this industry and in this current flow of things that is so utterly pivotalized, and it's really confusing sometimes. Like, about money again, one more thing. I really wish that, I know it's not enforceable, or it's probably never going to happen, but like as a statistics major actually in undergrad, I love reading the Opera America field reports, and there is usually a particular column about how much money they put in artistic productions and planning and all that kind of stuff. I really wish that can be more detailed, as in what's the artist pay, what is the conductor pay, that kind of stuff. It's never going to be out there, but I think if it were ever to be out there, it's going to be a shocker for a lot of people.
Yeah, agreed. I've just flashed up this.
Kathleen
this
has
heading
something
here,
to
the
say.
price of art. The price of art is one of the things that we talk about in the film, and so if you see these little things popping up during the course of this live, you'll know, like, okay, we've hit on a topic that is something that we explore in the film, along with many other topics. Marissa, what's the thing that makes the most difference to you when you turn up to an audition or to a new workplace? You know, I know there's two slightly different things. Let's maybe separate them out. Let's say, okay, you're turning up to an audition. What are the things that a company can do that are going to lead to you singing better?
Thank you. I'm glad you asked. I've been thinking about what I wanted to say in this, and some things that, you know, I feel that maybe as the other artists also feel, is that like I'm a conduit and I'm speaking for all of the other artists. And I feel like this heavy weight of having to represent everyone. I think the first thing is professionalism is a way that I know that I will do well. What I mean by that is that a company has told me in a timely fashion when my audition is, not a week before, not a day before. You know, they've given me ample time for me to make preparations for that. They have provided a pianist. I don't have to find a pianist. I don't have to, you know, they give me a time and then I have to switch. I'm allowed to sign up for that. Giving me every single opportunity to be an artist is one of those things. And the other thing is making it accessible, which is something I love to say, meaning either the audition is affordable, I'm not spending $50 to do that, or they're transparent about their casting before I go in there. So I'm not auditioning for a role that I then find out there was no way that I could have ever gotten this role because they already cast it beforehand. And now it looks like my audition was a money grab to get as much profit as they could to, you know, bolster whatever kind of, you know, cost is associated with it. I just think that artists see and they understand when professionalism is returned to them. And that's what makes us successful. That is what sets us up, is when I know that the people who are auditioning me see me as an equal and not as a pawn or, you know, someone that's, you know, as an endless line of people. They see me as an artist.
Yeah. Ria, does that ring true for you in your experience? Are there certain, I mean, even just mundane things that perhaps administrators don't think about when they're that really make an outsized difference to singers being successful in displaying their artistry at an audition? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm so glad we're talking about this. Just bringing it back to, I guess, the price of art and the price of what it takes to get to where you want to be. I feel like my biggest obstacle in literally all of this, like, operatic world is I, like Amandalynne, I couldn't afford to go to YAPs when I was still in undergrad. I did one YAP in my entire singing career, which was the Curtis Opera Summerfest. And you know, they didn't have any scholarships available, so we somehow made it work. But for me, it's frustrating because it seems like, and I really I thank you, Marissa, for sharing that. Just, you feel like it's a money grab. It makes me sometimes feel like, okay, so if we're just basing opportunities, connections off of how many programs you've been in, who have you worked with, who have you studied with, oh, you worked on them with this project, with this production, with this program, it's only available to people who are monetarily able to do that. And maybe it's a little controversial, but that doesn't always mean that the quality is going to be there. And for me, it just feels like, okay, even for that program, and I just have a lot of imposter syndrome as well. did they actually think I was good enough, or was it just a money grab? And for that, that's the biggest thing for me. Even during my time in conservatory, it's very, very obvious, who was technically advanced and who really had that talent, that raw talent that just needed to be molded, versus someone who, I hate to say it, but just paid their way in to get there. And so that's been probably the biggest barrier for me, and one of the most frustrating, I guess, things within this whole process for me. Because of that, like Amandalynne was saying, because of COVID backlogged and everything, if you are missing like that amount of training within a certain amount of time, it poses a question. Okay, so what were you doing? And then it just automatically counts you out in comparison to people who have been able to afford going to YAPs every single summer.
You've hit on something that I guess I never really thought about before, which is the relationship between money and resources, and this important process of being a young artist, developing a sense of self-esteem is a little bit simplistic, but this building your own artistry, a certain amount of that is a process of assessing, right? How powerful am I? How much am I able to actually affect people with my voice? Am I doing things that are moving people? And certainly realistically, am I doing something that is marketable? And all of those decisions are, it seems like from what you just said, a little bit muddied by this money factor. Not only do you not have the same access to opportunity if you can't afford to pay for it, but even if you do somehow scrape together that money and pay for it, or you're wealthy and you pay for it, you don't know what that, the money piece muddies that sort of value assessment that you are making of your own self as an artist. I think that's very interesting. We need to make another film, clearly, because we did not discuss that necessarily directly in this film. Kathy, I know that I'm not going to ask you what the solutions are necessarily to making opera affordable for less, for less wealthy singers to be a part of. You and I have discussed this at length, and we haven't necessarily come up with a lot of answers about it. But one other thing that we have talked about quite a lot that I'm interested to hear you talk about on this is the culture behind the panel desk, right? We have been in situations, you and I, where we're in a group that is being disrespectful to the singers that are performing. Here is the Facebook Live in which that gets discussed, right? And I'm interested in hearing about the horror of that, but I'm also interested in hearing about what we can do to change that tone on the ground as it's happening. Any ideas about that, my friend?
Well, I do see how like all of these topics are coming together, right? I think the tricky thing about this is that in exploring, I mean, this is essentially an art form that has a big like oral communication piece, right? You work with people who are in the field doing it, and you learn about tradition, how it was done before. You have to join together with your community and figure out how you're doing it now. So the idea of apprenticeship comes from there, and the idea of progress throughout your life, right? Ria, you said something about imposter syndrome. I think, all of us are always kind of checking ourselves, like, where are we in this progress? And that, I think, is what makes the money part of it and the hierarchy part of it so tricky, because as artists, we do know that like step-by-step development throughout our lives is something that we actually have to care for and do. But that can get really confused with sort of like gatekeeping hierarchy and and also we have some sort of magical beliefs about it. I mean, there's really good research in the United States, I mean, across the world, that shows that these sort of passion narratives get used to justify poorer treatment and poorer compensation. You know, that if you're passionate about something, you should actually not earn more money for it. That's a reason to keep you from doing that. There's a lot of scholarship about that, actually. So there's that part of it. There's also the idea of like talent just like sticking in there and, you know, waiting for the opportunity when you explode out into the scene. And that plays into what a lot of you are talking about, which is just sort of dishonesty through our culture, or I mean, lack of transparency is maybe a fairer way to say it, but I'll say dishonesty about money, about the fact that, you know, a lot of the situations are set up to make it impossible for people who don't have access to supportive income, you know, family income, spousal income, whatever, to do a lot of these opportunities. And there's also the way that we've put, YAPs have become a way to sort of shore up the ever shrinking seasons of opera companies, right? I just did an article with a friend for a cultural studies journal, and we were looking at some stuff to do with American YAPs. And there's one example from last season. There's a company, like, I like these people a lot. I'm not going to name them here, but it won't be hard to find. Their young artists did like 60% of the roles in their season, right? I mean, the season was on the backs of those 4 individuals, those 5, including their pianist. And, you know, Chuanyuan, like you, I'd love to look at the numbers of what their compensation actually was compared to, you know, everyone else. So that's the sort of structure that we find ourselves in. I apologize once again, Miriam, for offering first an answer to a question that you did not ask me. But that's, I feel like I want to like pull all those threads from the 5 of you together. In terms of disrespect on the other side of the audition table, yeah, I've lived through a lot of that. Also, a lot of my stories are pretty old. You know, I feel reluctant to share some of them, not because I feel protective of anybody, but because they're just depressing. I'm not sure how useful they are. So that's probably a little bit of pushback, but yeah, I've sat on the other side of an audition table and heard people say disrespectful things about how people are dressed, about how many children they have, about, you know, about all kinds of reasons, ostensibly, to not pass them through or not give them a chance. I mean, but I'm not even sure where to go with that. You know, I'm not, you know, what do
have you noticed any decisions that are being made, or any kind of initiatives that people maybe are playing with? And I'm aware that you are a little bit sidestepped out of the mainstream of the classical industry at the moment, but anything that you have noticed that has functioned differently in that regard, sort of deliberately? So is anybody trying anything that works?
Sure, of course. I mean, Victory Hall Opera.
Well, seeing as you mention it,
but
I think that
Brenda.
Yes, smooth.
But yes, I think I mean, initiatives and younger people, or younger thinking people, putting together collectives, trying to make a structure that has everyone equal in the structure. Yes, these things are popping up kind of all over the place. I don't know if our biggest institutions, this is from the heart, I don't know if our biggest institutions can change in that regard, because the model upon which they're based, you know, goes all the way back to Napoleon, right? I mean, I don't know. I'm not smart enough to give a good answer to this, but in the 21st century, in our current economic situation, our current climate situation, our current social situation, I don't know how opera and symphony and all of these big companies that cannot pay for themselves and must rely on sponsorship, I don't know how they go forward. And since they always will be dependent on sponsorship, big money from corporations or other people, I don't know how we find I don't know how we change these top-down hierarchies when the financing is always going to be a top-down hierarchy. It always is. So I mean, the thing that we're trying to adapt to is a wholesale change. If we want to be different together as people, as artists having relationships, I don't know what that means for opera companies as they have traditionally existed, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think on a micro level, one of the things that we've been fighting for at Victory Hall Opera and that we've led on for the past 10 years has been just putting, like I said in my intro, putting singers in positions that they're not normally in.
Yeah.
I think that the times that I have been the only singer on a panel that is talking all about how singers should be prepared and how they should be treated and what they should be taught have been very illuminating to me, and have made it very clear to me that the perception versus the reality is so different. One of the things that we talk about in the film, and I'm just going to throw this up here, is as a chapter title, is the biological instrument. The fact that the voice is the only biological instrument. Kathy, there's an email going out tomorrow in which three of the admins from the film sort of together talk about why voice is different in a very understanding way. Voice is different to any other instrument. It's not a piano. It's not a piece of furniture that you don't even own. You don't feel personal about the piano, right? Whereas the voice is us. It's our identity. Matteo, what does that mean to you? What does having a biological instrument involve that people might not even think about?
Well, the biological instrument is just that. It's not just from our physical vocal folds, right? It's about our identity as a person from day-to-day life experiences, the way we understand how these characters are meant to be portrayed in these operas are from largely our own life experience. So it really comes from a place of our mental, our physical, our spiritual, if anyone is spiritual. But for me, it's a combination of all of these things that lead to the creation of the instrument itself. So it's one of the only, I guess it's the only instrument that I would say that is not just tangible. Like some of it is tangible, obviously, but it's not just tangible. You know, some of it can't be explained. Others of it can. It can be explained a large amount, but like it's just the entire ecosystem of the body and the mind. You know, you have to be well rested, you have to be eaten well, you have to have slept well. You know, everything has to be set and relaxed before you even can think about the technical, which we've all practiced thousands of hours, right? So it's just the biological instrument is, I guess, just all of those things of our own life experiences and of, you know, the technical aspect, you know, so even like reflux can affect it, you know, so it's just an amalgamation of all these things.
I feel like anytime a singer goes to see an ENT, that the diagnosis is reflux, right?
Yeah.
It's like, no, we don't all have reflux. Okay. So Marissa, is there anything that, I know that you have to take off and go teaching. There's a lot of reorganization of people's lives that's happening to be here tonight. And I really, really appreciate us making the time to have this discussion. But before you go, is there anything that you would like us to address that you wanted to ask myself or Kathy or the other singers before you have to take off?
I do. I think I guess one of the things that I have always wondered about is, why does it take so long to tell us about auditions? That's one thing that I've always wondered. We talk about, like, for me, like, I don't like the idea that opera has to be accessible, with like the things of, with the oversight that the reason that it's not as accessible is because people are poor. To me, it's that we shouldn't have an industry that requires people to spend $10,000 just to survive. Having things like, online auditions is something, that to me doesn't seem like it would hurt any company, limit their ability. But my question is that these little oversights that to me always has read very disrespectful, and I guess I wanted to understand the reasoning behind it. One of them is waiting so long to tell us. I know that there's an arts organization that has petitioned a lot of companies to give us at least 2 to 3 weeks before an audition date, to have us, understand what reasonably we can have for, an audition time. I don't think anyone disagrees that there are some times when we do have to go to New York, when we do have to travel. My issue is when you give me a week's notice and it becomes inaccessible to me because it seems to me that you didn't do the foresight to, set up a time or a room. The other thing is, and this has always struck me as like an oversight, and I don't know if it's negligence, but it seems so disrespectful, is not taking the time to tell me I didn't get in. It has made me feel so terrible about myself. I have a list that I have to keep track of companies to hold them accountable, is what it feels like. And so many times I have to email places and say, did I get an audition? Sometimes I do find out that I got an audition and, I got lost in, the mumble jumble of everything, and that's fine. But what I don't think a lot of arts organizations understand is that when you do not treat me like an artist, it doesn't make me want to go to your shows. And I think this is one of the things when we talk about, us struggling with funding. I'm just wondering, is it intentional, this oversight of not giving us a notice, or is this just like how it's supposed to be run?
Oof. I mean, every single young artist that I spoke to in this process, and there were a lot more than this group, commented on this one thing. And Kathy, the thing that is interesting to me is that there's the frustrations that YAPs almost universally are having, are these kind of bureaucratic, easy to solve problems. They're not big artistic, I'm being asked to perform something I don't want to perform, or in a way I don't want to perform. It's this kind of bureaucratic stuff, which I find really maddening. I think that you did touch on it earlier in terms of the kind of the money grab factor, again, in conversation with Ariana for the film. It's not in the film, but she did sort of say, like, it just is baffling to those of us who take the time to treat sing as well. It's really, really baffling to think that the cost of doing business is being placed on the shoulders of those least able to accommodate that cost. I cannot fathom it personally. I cannot give an answer to it. If anyone is watching on the stream and has a reason why that happens, why you can't send out a form email saying, sorry, you didn't get it this time, because listening to it, it doesn't seem possible that doesn't happen. But I know from every single person I spoke to that this is the primary concern that they have, is that you're left in a limbo. Yeah. Anything to add, Kathy? Anything we need to take into consideration about what's going on behind the scenes?
I can't speak in detail to individual companies, except to know that they're playing administration as close to the bone as they can financially as well, in terms of people's time. But I think this all goes along with, well, you put it really well, Miriam, and I mean, you did too, Marissa, that the costs of trying to enter this system are really completely placed on the people at the low end of the ladder, right? The people who are, almost all of those costs are borne by you in the United States. And that goes along with this sort of romance of apprenticeship that I think we carry from the 19th century, that part of what you're supposed to do is struggle and try. I mean, we're experiencing this in a sort of post-capitalist, like super neoliberal space. But this goes way back to, the guilds of Europe, where in order to become an independent worker in any sort of craft or art, you would apprentice for a number of years with someone who was already doing it. The Sistine Chapel is painted by Michelangelo, right? AKA Michelangelo and the 100 people who were apprenticing with him, right? Whose names we will never know, whose individual work we will not actually be able to identify. So that labor is kind of anonymized, and we don't even see it. As you're bearing that cost, people don't see that work that you're doing. But it's such an old tradition, and we've kind of romanticized the idea that suffering is part of what you do to earn your way into the system. That and we think of it in terms of suffering and sacrifice, instead of thinking about it as you said earlier, Chuanyuan, like, let's talk about money. I think that's kind of it. It feels so prosaic to say that that's at the heart of a lot of it, but that is what we're talking about. How do we keep a system going that is really on the backs of the people that are trying to enter it?
Comments here from Mary Pinto, our colleague. They weren't taught well. It is a simple consideration. I think that sums it up. Does anyone else have anything that they want to raise on the chat tonight?
I just wanted to say I have
a few minutes left.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, you have to go. Okay. See you, Marissa. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Did anyone come prepared with burning questions? Okay, great. Well, anyone on the chat is also welcome to ask a question, but I want to end with something that I was talking about with a friend today. It's called the Chevy metaphor. Your family's only car is a Chevrolet Bel Air. You've grown up driving it, first proudly, then with some trepidation, as parts of the car started to break down or break off. It started to spew gas and wouldn't run on modern fuel. You learned so many skills and spent so much time and energy fixing that car. And after all, it was an American-made Chevrolet and therefore a quality vehicle. The parts become harder to get hold of, so you spend a lot of time crying that there are no longer the right parts. You begin borrowing parts from other Chevy owners. Your vehicle becomes more and more impractical for modern life, much as it was still admired for its grandeur and craftsmanship. Your entire skill set becomes focused on the Chevy and keeping it running, even though it has to be driven less and less. You thought maybe if there was an ad campaign to get more young people to buy Chevys, they would start making the parts again. One day you look around and your neighbors are driving a Tesla. It didn't even look like a car to you, and it certainly wasn't something you could understand mechanically. You figured it was best to stick with the Chevy. It was more beautiful. It was better quality.
Your metaphor is breaking down for me the minute you said the word Tesla. Sorry.
But intentionally chosen, because now we are trying to replace opera with something that is potentially going to be less grand. It's going to involve less sort of this kind of old world grandeur, right? What are we replacing it in, and what do we care about now in terms of, what takes the place of this as a vehicle for what we do? It certainly should also have a high moral standard, and I think that's interesting to think about, that we care that who Tesla is owned by. We didn't necessarily care who Chevy was owned by. A metaphor about opera.
Well, whoever Chevy was owned by, those people had union jobs.
Right, union jobs.
Sorry, I'm just here to be all 20th century on you. I'll just recede now into my hole.
Yeah. So, I mean, we all need to we all need to innovate, right? We all need to find new ways forward. I just want to thank you all for joining. I know that with this many people on chat, nobody gets to say very much, but I think that it was a really interesting conversation, and I hope that conversations like these can bring the humanity to the picture, because I think that the only answer that I have found so far is to try to tell y'all's stories so that there are human faces behind the numbers and the bankroll. So I hope that we can achieve that, and thank you for joining me and helping me achieve that. I did have a sort of a plan to spring a little surprise video on you this evening, but I've decided not to. I've decided to make you watch the YAPs live stream next month. You'll be hearing details about that. But let me tell you that just to let the cat out of the bag, this group of people made a music video for the film. It's in the film. It's also going to be released shortly before the film. It is amazing. Ria Epa did a cover of Invincible by Pat Benatar. Talk about remaking the Chevy. It is a beautiful thing. And we want to show it to you at the right moment. But now you know that it's out there and you can look out for it on Instagram. If you are in Charlottesville, buy your tickets right now to the premiere of the YAPs film, which is showing on the big screen at Vinegar Hill Theatre on the 31st of May in 11 days. It's a small theater, so make sure you get your tickets, and you will get to meet Marissa and Ria afterwards and have a glass of champagne if you buy a VIP ticket. We will be having a Q&A after the show as well, which will be hosted by the amazing Paul Wagner. If you are running a program, if you are an administrator who is running a YAP, or is a teacher in a class or a school, or is just wanting to show some interesting material to your board or at a fundraiser, and you would like to show the YAPs film, please get in touch with us. You can contact us through the website, and you can gain a license to have a private screening of YAPs, which you can either sell tickets to, or you can just show for a small licensing fee. It's very affordable, and it's a really, really good conversation starter for anyone has anything to do with running a YAP. I think that's about all, and I am very, very happy to have seen you all. And for those of you who are watching afterwards when I post this on YouTube, thank you for watching as well. And yeah, stay tuned for more about the YAPs documentary. Bye for now.